Welcome back to the channel, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled today to be joined by the author of The Children of Gods and Fighting Men and the entire Gale Song series, SHAUNA Lawless. SHAUNA, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, no problem at all. Thank you so much for inviting me on to chat about my books.
Well,
it's lovely.
I had to invite you on. Normally, I would wait until I'd read the whole trilogy. Well, I believe that it's a trilogy and then 3 novellas as well, correct?
Yes, and actually there is a sequel series that is coming out at the end of this year as well.
Oh, okay. Normally I would have waited at least to get to the trilogy before I talked to you, but I couldn't stand it. I couldn't wait. This is one of those, as a reader, as you go through life reading and going on these adventures, sometimes you hit something and it's, that is just written for me. And once a month, we do a big vote. The Patreon throws books at us, and we have a big vote, and we have a big book club. And Children of Gods and Fighting Men was a book club winner. And I got to, one of the biggest parts of my life when I was 50 is when my family took me to Ireland, so I could see where the family came from.
Okay.
This, such an amazing tapestry that you just braid the true history of this place in the late 900 AD, as well as the myths and the legend and some of the magic that sometimes can more define a people and a place. And you do such an amazing job braiding it. It was just absolutely beautiful. I could not wait. Just reading book 1, I had to reach out and talk to you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Let me just start. We always kind of get started on these with the same kind of question. And it always strikes me the answers are so different. There must have been a time in your life when you knew, when it hit you, when you got the calling, this is it. I want to be a storyteller. Can you remember that time?
Well, I started to write stories when I was very young. It was reading and writing were my 2 favorite things to do by a mile. So I always really enjoyed that. I enjoyed reading stories, and I loved magic so much as well, in particular. But my granny, she really knew her Irish mythology and Irish folklore, and she wrote stories as well. And she would incorporate her grandchildren and great-grandchildren into her stories.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, so even though she died when I was quite young, I have this whole folder of all her stories. And there's loads of Irish mythology and folklore within them. So, I mean, I read those stories quite a lot when I was younger. And so it really, I don't know, I think it's probably quite inspiring that you're reading stories that someone in your family has written that other people don't have access to, apart from my cousins and aunts and uncles. So I was very inspired by my grandmother, and so I like to write stories about magic as well. Yeah. And that just sort of continued, really.
So what a gift! Do you remember around how old you were when she started passing these stories to you?
Oh, so I am the last grandchild in the Davy family on my father's side. So she had been writing these stories long before I was born. And I think maybe her last story that she wrote was with me.
Oh, wow.
And my nephew Colin. So my older sister had a little boy, and so we were the 2 characters in her last story. But she had been writing stories for years, and she wrote autobiography stories as well of her life growing up in Ireland in the very early 1900s. Which are very interesting as well, and also full of folklore, because my granny really believed in those stories. So then they're not far-fetched imaginings for her. She would have really believed in banshees and the fairy people and all of that. So her stories are so interesting because they are not only wonderful stories, but stories that she probably had quite a personal connection to, and that she had a lot of belief in herself. So she'd been writing for a long, long time before even I started to read them.
What an amazing gift. Wow, what an amazing gift. To be part of a familial lineage like that in Ireland that weaves magic into the real world and the real story, and just just that gift to see the world that way and pass it on. Like, wow, that had to leave a huge impression. And I can see you carrying it, was that a big impetus to you carry that tradition on in your work?
I don't know if I thought of it like that so much. I just think kind of when somebody else has done something, it makes it feel more attainable for you. But certainly I think the fact that her stories were so laced with Irish history and mythology is one of the reasons why whenever I started to write my stories, it felt very natural to do that. So I know a lot of people would be like, oh, like it seems crazy that you decided to intertwine Irish history with mythology. But to me, it didn't seem like an odd thing to do at all. It seemed very normal.
Yeah.
And then a lot of kind of the older Irish mythological stories, especially stories like the Cattle Raid of Cooley, which is a very famous story over here, that does weave Irish history with like magical characters, I guess. Like a Cuchulainn and the Morrigan are in that story. And so in Ireland, I think there just is a kind of legacy of there being magic within history.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that too. So you got stories passed on. You got that calling. It felt attainable because it was in your own family, passing them on. So you started to have a glimmer of a call to be a storyteller. What set you off? Did you go an academic route to study how to become a storyteller? Did you just sit down with a pencil and paper and start writing and say, this is what I do, this is who I am? How did that journey start for you?
Well, so then here's the kind of the rest of the story. So my granny was a fantastic storyteller and wrote down all these stories. But like she grew up in rural Ireland in the very early 1900s, then moved to Belfast and lived just off the Falls Road, which is not a very wealthy area. So she had normal jobs and writing for her was her hobby. And so for me, like I grew up in Northern Ireland and during a time really where there weren't a lot of jobs. And so for me, writing was similar. It's a hobby. It's not a job. Right? Really?
Okay. Yeah. So just a place to escape, just what you love, just something for yourself.
Yes, exactly. And I read prolifically. And so I know whenever even like I was looking at what would you be reading for, say, like degrees in universities, and like I had read all the books. And so I remember, even though now I think of myself and be like, what were you on? Like you sound insane. But I kind of looked at doing an English degree as sort of not overly interesting because I had read everything,
sure, you'd done it.
Yeah. And so I wasn't interested overly in, I guess, studying other people's interpretations of books. Now I would love to go and do an English degree. I think that's so interesting. But just back then I was like, I read these books and I don't know what job I would get. So I actually randomly ended up doing finance and accountancy.
What? Did you just spin a wheel? Like, How did you get to finance?
Because I thought, I don't know anything about this. I don't understand how money or economics works. This maybe is something I should study. And my maths teacher was like, you'll definitely get a job in this, Shauna.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, okay.
Like my mom and dad were really confused as to why I did that. They were like, you don't like economics or finance. And I'm like, I know. But I do look back at myself and just, I wonder sometimes what was going on in my head. I can't quite catch what I was doing. But it did sort of work out because actually, in my novels, there is a lot of economics and finance, because I know we sort of look back at history and sometimes we think wars are started by like fallings outs or romantic entanglements and things like that. But no, it's normally money. Yeah. It's normally economic reasons why wars start and why people are motivated to invade other countries and whatnot. So I actually think in retrospect, having a understanding of finance and economics helped me to write my books. So that's sort of a very long-winded answer.
Oh no, I found this fascinating. So did you finish the degree program and go into work in finance? No kidding. You went the whole The whole nine. You went the whole way.
I'm a chartered accountant. I worked for Ernst & Young for years. And
the big names. So then,
yeah.
so what? You're working at Ernst & Young's. I'm sure you're successful. You have the degree. You went on this path. What pulled you back to say, you know what, it's time to write books now?
Right. So whenever I was a teenager / like early 20s, so when I'm still at university, I wrote a lot of stories then for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband's uncle, he's like really into magic and stories and reading. And so I let him read some of my stories and he really enjoyed them. And so fast forward, it's my 30th birthday party. I've got 2 children at this stage. And my husband's uncle comes up to me and he's like, well, where's your next story?
Yeah.
I was like, well, I don't have time to write any more stories because I've got this crazy, intense job.
And a mother and
2 children. Yep.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, I don't have time to write stories anymore. And he just went, well, that's a real shame because when you're really good at something, you should make time to do it, or you should make more time. And at the start, that annoyed me because I was like, well, that's very easy for you to say.
Sure. Yeah.
Because, like even just having 2 children is really hard. Having a job's really hard. Having both together is intensely difficult.
Yeah. What a full life.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on. And so, but by the next day, this had really annoyed me because I myself had wanted to get back to writing, but I had just struggled to find time. So me and my husband talked about it and he said, right, well, look, how about every other night I do the kids' bedtime routine. Every other night you do the kids' bedtime routine. And so say for that hour and a half, bath time, story time, bedtime, every other night, you have that hour and a half to yourself. And previously, I would have gone, no, an hour and a half isn't enough time to write. I need longer than that. But desperate as I was by this stage, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to take that hour and a half and, I'll see what I can do. And I started the next night to write. And I remember it was the 1st of September. And by the 30th or 31st of December, 4 months later, I had 80,000 words in a document. So it sort of, all the words were in my head. They just poured out. Right?
They just came out. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they'd sort of been building up for so long.
And what was were those 80,000 words the beginning of Children of God and Finding Men, or is it a different story? Something else. Okay.
Yeah, it was honestly just like a splurge of ideas. It wasn't very coherent. But it was something that was Irish based. There was mythology in it. I wrote a novel. It took me 2 years to finish it. It was 200.
Doing the every other night thing.
Yeah, just every other night.
Oh my God, that's crazy commitment.
Yeah. It was 230,000 words and completely unpublishable. But I was, I'd finished something and then I thought to myself, right, well, writing is one thing. Self-editing is a completely separate skill set. And I was like, I haven't done that when I wrote this. I need to actually learn to edit a book and make it readable, I guess. So I then spent 2 years learning to edit. So
now, okay, how did you learn how did this education take place for you?
Okay, so I went onto a website called Critique Circle, which is free. I used it for years as a completely free website, and you can put up a chapter of your book and people will critique it for you. But to earn points to put your chapters up, you have to critique other people's work.
So basically a community, and you're an artist co-op, you're looking at each other's works. Okay.
Yes. And there is nothing that teaches you to edit so fast as reading other people's work, actually.
Sure.
You think all the feedback that you're getting on your chapters is the work. It's not. Because what you very quickly learn is that when you're reading other people's work, some of it's good, some of it's bad. You really quickly learn the difference. And then you'll read your own work and go, oh. So see the way I read someone's first chapter and I said, this was too info dumpy and you've given me too much.
Yeah.
Like in chapter 1, you suddenly will read your chapter 1 and go, oh, I done exactly
Guilty.
the same thing. Yeah. It just
Yeah.
makes everything a lot clearer. So I did that for 2 years, learning
Mhm.
to, and then like edited the book. And so now we're 4 to 5 years kind of actually at this stage where I've got one book,
Yeah.
and I got it down to 180,000 words, which
Okay.
still isn't publishable as a
So
debut
it's a
author.
lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
It's too much. And I did send it off to a few agents. One agent came back, and so in this older novel, I had like time travel. And so some of it was set in the future and some of it was set in like the past in Ireland. And he just said to me, you know, I couldn't represent this, but the chapters in the past were really, really good. And
Mhm.
just,
Mhm.
you know, saying that maybe you should look at that. Like the future stuff was okay, but like there's a lot of people doing that, and you know yours was good, but didn't really stand out the past. However, he goes, I can't think anyone that really does that for Irish history.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So
So
that's an amazing, your story here is these amazing moments you have, even if it is annoying, like that one moment before. Where's my next story?
yeah,
You've got these crystalline moments of pushing you, moving you towards to educate yourself more and more and more, to hone it down and get to where it needs to be. And this agent taking time and giving you that type of feedback that's huge. I would imagine for your journey.
yeah, yeah. So I was lucky that he spoke to me, and actually I was very lucky as well because Dublin Worldcon was on that year,
Mm-hmm.
and he was there. And so I actually went up to him and I was able to talk to him and say, oh, you know, I sent you my book, and obviously, you know, you didn't accept it, and that's fine, but thank you for kind of talking to me. And he spoke to me a bit more, actually, and gave me a bit more in-depth feedback, which was
Mm-hmm.
lovely. And that's the first time I'd ever been to any sort of con. And so that's always useful, I think, for aspiring writers, because you get to speak to people.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
As
yes,
opposed, you know,
definitely.
people don't say so much on emails anymore. So then they're more willing to give a bit more feedback face to face. So yeah, so now at this stage, I'm like, right, so I've learned a load. I've kind of
Right.
finished a novel. I've learned to edit. I feel a bit more confident in what I want to do. And the next book I wrote then was The Children of Gods and Fighting Men.
And you focused entirely on the past and you took
Yes.
the advice. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So I hear you say a couple times, I want to go back to something real quick, that you, even when you were starting very young, you were just an avid reader, just one of your favorite things to do. Can you tell us some of these stories, could be back when you were a child or later on, that really struck you, that really spoke to you, that really moved you to make you go, that's what I want to do?
So I really always loved historical fiction,
Mm.
classical fiction, and fantasy. They were always the three
Mm-hmm.
genres that I was really drawn to. And in a way, I kind of find historical fiction and classical fiction, because most of that is set in the past anyway, to
Mm-hmm.
be fantastical. Because
Yeah, it's a different world from what
it's
we know for sure. Yeah.
right. Yeah. And so I was always drawn to new places, and I guess different societies and how they operated, historically speaking. So I remember being like really fascinated by like Jane Eyre would have been an
Mm-hmm.
early book that I was really drawn to. The Count of Monte Cristo,
Mm-hmm.
lots of Tudor. Like I was very fascinated by the Tudor period for a while. Also by a period of history, kind of like War of the Roses and previous to that.
Sure, sure.
But literally anything, like you could have given me a book from any, like to do with the history of any country in the world, and I would just be, oh, that would be interesting. Like if it's in Africa, if it's in Asia, if it's like America, anywhere. I loved a book called Wild Swans, which was about like 3 generations of women in China,
Oh,
kind of
really? Okay.
pre-communist revolution, and then into the communist revolution. So I just loved that so much. But then obviously a big fantasy thing was that my brother gave me his copies of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings when I was about 11.
Of course. Yeah.
And then so that was a kind of a big gateway into fantasy for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for so many of us. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So if you can, so you took the agent's advice. Let's focus on the past. You've got some kind of secret sauce that stands head and shoulders above some of the other things I'm reading. So you took that advice, you started working on Gods and Fighting Men, and you started to weave in, like your granny used to do, some of these magic and some of these myths and folklore legends. Can you give us a crash course? Because a lot of us hear myths and folklore. Now, I'm sure I'm going to pronounce this wrong, Shauna, so you get on me when I do, okay? But to choose or to go back all the way to the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians, what spoke to you about that? Give us a little bit of a crash course about why you're going all the way back to these things instead of maybe like some more recognizable myths and legends we might know.
Okay. So there's a huge amount of Irish mythology to start off with. And then we have Irish folklore, which comes like way after. Irish folklore, kind of banshees and like the fairy people. They're derived from the Tuatha De Danann, actually, but they're kind of set like really thousands of years later. And so whenever I was kind of reading Irish mythology, I mean, the oldest legends, they're in the mythological cycle of Irish mythology, and it's the most magical. And so I was just drawn to it the most. Once you get to the Ulster cycle, which is Cuchulainn stories, and the Fenian cycle, which is Finn McCool stories, like there is magic in them, but it's just, they're not as magical is what I would say. Like the first cycle of mythology is, you know, there's warriors, there's healers, people get their arms cut off, healers come over and grow them whole new arms. Like the Fomorians like have fire magic, and it's all like, it probably was a bit more Lord of the Ringsy, you know, because you've got like epic battles and bad and evil versus good. And actually, like Tolkien probably did, well, people do think that he derived a lot of his inspiration for Lord of the Rings from the mythological cycle. So Baelor, who was this giant with an evil eye, like a fiery eye, you know, so you can sort of see that.
You can start to see some parallels. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's like the land Tir na Nog, which is the land of like everlasting beauty and youth. And you can kind of see that's the Undying Lands where the elves go to. So I felt, I don't know, I was just drawn to it. I think it's just the magic of it. I just loved, and that the scope was more epic.
Yeah. It does seem to have, going back that far, it does seem to have a bit of a, it's like Untamed, it's wild, it's grand, it's sweeping, it's huge, you know?
Yeah.
And I was struck by the first book I've read here, Children of Gods and Fighting Men. The timeline does such an amazing job of dovetailing with some of your themes, because in the late 900s, when we're having kind of a shift in spiritual philosophy as far as Christianity and these things coming over, I mean, this was part of some of that wildness from the mythology leaving. Yes, if I'm correct, it's like we took the matriarch of the pantheon, Bridget, we made her a saint. Everything else kind of, like you say, thousands of years became these simpler myths and these more childlike myths. So was that part of your plan of placing it in the late 900s to kind of show that schism?
Yes, very much so, because one of the final legends we have is Oisin, who is the son of Finn McCool. He comes back from, I think it might be Tir na Nog, or it's one of the kind of islands that are magical. And he comes back to Ireland, but he feels like he's only been away for one day, but actually he's been away for hundreds of years.
Right.
And so whenever he, you know, if he's to set foot in Ireland, he'll die. But there's another version of that story whereby St. Patrick talks to him, and they have this conversation, and it's sort of, and I think a monk must have written this,
sure,
with a view to conversion, because it's sort of like you can believe what happened before, but Christianity is now the new way, right?
Yeah.
And so I was like, that somebody has tried to kind of write a story to explain like the trajectory of the old religion in Ireland and explaining how it's okay that you did believe in it, but now we need to move forward and Christianity's a new religion. And I always hated that story. Like I preferred the older one where like he just died when he like stepped foot in Ireland again because it was more tragic. And so I was like, no, I want to write a new version of how the magic in Ireland like faded away.
Yes,
And
yes.
so,
And what a tragedy! What a tragedy!
yeah.
That fades. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so,
and I
And so
get
this
that
is a
so
good
much
period.
from. I get that so much from book one, and I was wondering if that's why you placed it there, because of, in a way, civilization, humanity growing to a point where we're going to leave some of our things behind. And one of those things being that whimsy, that magic, that untamed, that grand sweep of magic. That
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. And then this is also like a very like iconic time in Ireland, because not only do you have the conversion, which I mean, that's been going on for a couple of 100 years at this point, but not very quickly and not very well. But you also then have the Viking settlements, and then they are also going through the same thing. So they have a different kind of pagan religion, but they are also beginning to convert at this point, or thinking of converting. And so you have a real like mesh of different religious beliefs and systems kind of crashing together, and like each one's, I guess, trying to vie for supremacy. Yeah, and so I just found that like is a very turbulent time in Irish history, and so it just felt like a good setting.
And in other, Europe writ large, that's going on at that time too, and you're so right. What a great possibility for conflict from an artist, from a storyteller for that time.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit. This is another thing I just so adored about this first book. You subvert a little bit about our classic ideals of this genre a little bit, because we have two truly, they feel both protagonists in a lot of ways, and they're both these amazingly strong females that are filled with their own ideals and agency. And the late 900s is not rife with these types of stories with these female leads. Was that your master plan? Did you always know you wanted to do that and subvert that in a certain way? Talk to me a little bit about that, because I absolutely loved it.
Well, I do know that you're a big fan of Uhtred and Bernard Cornwell. And, I did initially try to like begin the story from a warrior's point of view. And literally, I just was writing Uhtred.
Yeah,
because I think
he had a little cameo in this too.
Yeah, there is an Uhtred in there. It's not that Uhtred. I think
it's earlier. Yeah,
it's the later. It's a later.
Oh, is it later? Okay. Yeah. Well, if it's later, then that family continues to not have any creativity and continually naming everyone the same name. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is true. Like that Uhtred is a real character.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was like, no, okay, so we're not going to do that. And Gormla is actually a historical character. We actually have quite a bit of documentation about Gormla compared to other women in this time period. She is in two major source documents, and they both talk about her rather badly. So she is like a seductress. She is a warmonger, and kind of basically provokes the men in her family to war. And so both these documents don't have very nice things to say about her. And I was like, right, well, this is interesting, because women in this period of Irish history are not really documented very well. The kings and the princes and all that, you kind of get more about them, but not really the women. And so the fact that she has been talked about not in only one document, but in two, is significant. And so initially I thought, maybe I should revise this kind of very unfair assessment of her and make her like a nice character. But then I thought, no, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to make her worse than these depictions of her are. Because I kind of find with female characters in historical settings, be it like Joan of Arc or Anne Boleyn, characteristics for them that say ambition, especially ambition, actually, they're always depicted in a woman as being a very negative characteristic. But if they were to be a king or a warrior, then suddenly ambition is a fantastic quality.
It's admirable. Yeah.
Yes. And so I thought, well, I'm going to have her be this woman, but I'm going to leave it to the reader maybe to judge as to whether she is completely bad or not. Because actually, she's really doing what most of the men around her are doing anyway.
Yeah.
But of course, then for there to be a foil to Gormla, there had to be a Fola. And so Fola is very sweet. She's very naive. She has been very secluded from the real world. I think most women and men, to an extent, are Fola.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you read the stories, you want to be the king or the prince or the warrior, but you normally are not, you know.
Yeah.
And so when I invented then these two characters, and then very quickly the theme of motherhood kind of came to the fore as a defining characteristic for both of them. And it's something that I have found being a mother and a parent, and I'm like, fathers will definitely understand this too, is that when you have children, you know, you want the best for them. And so on one hand, you're like, well, what can I do to make sure my child is like further ahead? How can I give them an advantage over everyone else? But on the other hand, you're like, well, but I want my child to live in a nice environment and a nice place. And so to an extent, everybody has to get ahead.
Yes.
And so what philosophy wins? You know, where do you go? And I think I'm a Fola. Like I would like kind of where I live to be lovely for everybody. But you do have those moments in your head where you're like, oh, if my child could just get ahead in this area or just ahead in this area, then
you know, I'd love it to be lovely for everyone, but maybe just, you know, can I just have this little extra?
Yeah. So so that kind of for me became a key defining difference between the two main characters.
Yeah, you know, and I was struck when you were talking about Gormla like that I'm going to go all in. I'm going to make her worse. And it's like, and then you quickly said leave it up to the reader, because she didn't strike me like that. I mean, I can definitely, as far as her motivations go, I can definitely track. So much of what she's doing is for the good of her family. And she looks at herself in the mirror and knows deep in her soul what she's doing is the right thing for who she is and where she is and the people around her. There's no mustache twirling or evil thread that you can just pull off of her. Yeah.
No, she feels that she does things for the right reasons. She does get worse. Just going to warn you now. She gets worse as the series goes on. But yeah, so no, I have some people who read my story and they absolutely hate Gormla. And I think there's like a trial scene in the first book. And they are like, well, what she does there is like unforgivable. And she knew what had happened and she kind of, ruled the way that she did. And it kind of proves that she's this terrible person. And I feel 50% of the people are on that track. And then the other 50% absolutely adore Gormla. And even when she does terrible things, they still love her.
I do see exactly what you say, though, because if it was a male character and ruled that way, in a pragmatic way, what's best for where they are at that time, what's destiny calling for them to do, it would be looked at a completely different way.
Yeah. So that was interesting, and that's why I did that scene in The Children of Gods and Fighting Men, and it was very specific about it. Like a girl has her hair cut off by someone else, and that was huge. Very intentional as well.
Yes, yeah. Oh, okay. So let me bring up. This is another favorite thing of mine when authors do this, and in speculative fiction, it happens so often. That's why I'm such a big fan. And that is when we're looking at the human experience through this expanded lens of a prolonged life. I love the way Anne Rice does it. I love the way there's some other writers that truly do it, but they look at a pantheon and they put our human concerns onto that, and because they're so long lived, you can almost get a grander look at the human experience because they have vast lifespans. And you get into that a little bit with this book, and I so adored it. Talk to me a little bit about that. And you said Fola is naive. She's young. She's a century or so old, a century's old. And at the same time, for a Tuatha De Danann, now she is young. But was that when you were started to construct this, and maybe you had all your cards out on the table and you're shuffling them around, however you work, was that a theme that this moving away from magic to the modern world, was that something that you wanted to capture?
Yes. And I think if I think of Fola, and I almost think of the kind of the collapse that the Catholic Church had in Ireland in like the 1980s, 1990s. Like Ireland is a very different country now to the one that I grew up in. It was like so super Catholic when I was growing up. And then kind of once lots of scandals came out, it kind of, a lot of people, some people lost their faith as some people moved away from the church. And I definitely saw in family members and friends a kind of a dropping of the veil, shall we say, even in older people, not just like young people. And so I think, and I'm not saying anything anti-religious or anything anti the church even, but it is just whenever you're in a society that's very unquestioningly religious, and then something happens to kind of make you question what you've believed. It's a big thing. It's a big thing that happened in my lifetime. And so for Fola, she looks young, but yes, you're right, she's older. But I think that journey maybe mirrors what some of the older generation went through in Ireland whenever they began to question things that they had been
so interesting
believing. And because I know a lot of people comment on that, and it's like, oh, and people can get annoyed with Fola because she is so naive. And they're like, but she's older, like surely she wouldn't believe this anymore. But I'm like, no, that's not true. Like actually, the longer you believe things, the harder it can be to to believe something else. And it's only that she is forced out into the real world that suddenly all these beliefs that she's had for so long begin to fall away. And then she realizes that she has been purposely shielded and lied to. Yeah.
And she's having that crisis of faith from what she believed that mirrors your time as a young person in the 80s and 90s in Ireland. That's absolutely fascinating. And she was warned by her sister before she went off into, as you say, the real world, that the blinders are going to come off. You're going to see what humanity is in all of its beauty and profanity.
Yes. And also that like the society she's been living in, which she kind of believes is good. You might think that that's not true now. Yeah. And that has to be reassessed. And perhaps these huge differences that you believed existed between the Tuatha De Danann descendants and the people, maybe they're not so big after all. Maybe everyone's quite similar. Yeah. And so they were big things for Fola.
Yeah. Just a quick break in the action to thank all of our correspondents, directors, and producers on Patreon. These people keep the lights on. They make decisions for us because we don't know what we're doing. We're not great at making the decisions around here. The decisions all the way from what I'm going to read next, what the book club of the month Patreon pick is going to be, but all the way up to video ideas and what we're going to do here on the channel coming up for you. If you're interested or you want to find out how you can be a part of this, right down there in the description box, click the Patreon link. It's got all the answers for you. And once again, thank you to all of these fine people that are helping us build the channel, our correspondents, directors, and producers. Well, it's a bit of foreshadowing there, the Tuatha De Danann, because they have pulled back. I mean, they have their spies out there in the churches and things like that to see what's going on. But they're really, they've walled themselves off to a large degree. And they only pull back further and further and further as that schism happens and becomes broader and broader, of the old magic starts to fade away. So it's a bit of a foreshadowing there that I truly appreciated. And I loved the glamour that they hit her with. We have so many stories of glamour, and it's a bit of a subversion when you do it because, she's just made hideous so she can move around in the real world.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was that, talk to me about that. When you come up with these ideas, Sean, or do you plan these all out and outline everything and all the themes, how you want them to hit? Or you are just creating and you're just letting these characters speak to you?
Gosh, do you know, I don't know. I honestly don't understand how I write. Every single book, I'm like, I should try to think about how I do this. Some of the history for me is a backbone. So I know the story, but I don't really know what the characters are going to do. And I just start to write, and normally it just comes to me. But I do think about things a lot as well. I don't just like steam ahead with like any old idea. Like I'll try to think about the idea and is it the right one. And so, for example, for Fola, yes, so she has a slammer on her, and she's to make her very ugly and unattractive, so that like kind of the men of the mortal realm like won't notice her. And that's the kind of rationale she's given. And because for me, and I'm such a big believer in this, is that, and especially today, and I've got they're not young children anymore, but like teenagers to young children, and we are bombarded with beauty.
Nonstop.
As being the number one thing that you need to be. It's like everything else almost is completely irrelevant. And I absolutely hate that. I just cannot. And I hated it when I was a teenager as well. It was just like, it's funny now. Sometimes there's like clips on Instagram with things that people said to celebrities in the 90s. And it was like women who were like very skinny being told that they were fat.
Yeah.
But so that's what I grew up with. And I just couldn't, I just hate it. And so with Fola's journey, I was like, people are going to see her beauty because she's such a beautiful person inside.
Yes.
And I really wanted that to be kind of part of her journey.
And people do see that. It's the compassion, and it's the empathy, and it's the ability to heal. And she's just a beautiful soul thrust into this real world. I mean, she's in this magical, ephemeral, beautiful thing. She may be covered, but she's still is what she is.
Yes. And so for me, it was like, that's going to be a big thing, because you're going to see that throughout the story, that people will be drawn to her, as in the real world. Like whenever like I go out to the bars with my friends, we are not crowded around the most attractive person. We are crowded around the people who tell the good stories, who are telling the jokes, who's singing a good song, who's the crack, who's got like the chat. It is never ever to do with like, how does somebody look, ever.
And that's the thing I wish we could teach. I mean, I've tried the best to teach my son. I'm sure you've tried the best to teach your children that it's like, that's what you can create, what you can change in the world around you. These are the kind of things that really, it's not what you are wearing, or the physical is just, is fleeting at best.
Yes, exactly. And so for me, it was very, very deliberate. And I think you probably by the end of book 1, and that certainly develops into book 2, you would definitely see that people are drawn to Fola, even though physically she presents as someone that's like bowed over and wrinkled and burned and like not attractive at all.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited for that. I want to talk a little before you start running out of time. I have some other things here, and this idea of this look at humanity through this long expanded life. The other thing that you use are so well for me here, and you were talking about Gormla, people hate her or love her, and Fola to a large extent as well, and the Tuatha and drawing away. Right, there's this ticking clock element to the story. Where these are some of the last of their kind. They're either going to pull away and recede from humanity entirely, or in Gormla's case and her brother, they're the last. They're the last ones. And I just, that scene for Gormla when her hair starts to come out, and it's like, oh, the clock's ticking. Like the clock is ticking. That power to do what you need to do to further who we are and what we represent and what we believe in. That brings into such sharp focus some of the scheming and machinations and all the things. So was that part of the reason why you went with this long drawn out war between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians, and this time, this ticking clock where, these are some of the last players on the field, because it just gives it that impetus and that extra kick.
Yeah, no, certainly it is, because if you just live forever or for a very long time, the problem with writing that is that there's no urgency or there's no threat. Right. And so that's the threat then, is that for the Fomorians, where there's only like literally 2 left, that's a big issue for them. Like, what are they going to do? And their mother somehow got them into a position of power.
Right.
Right. And she is like, right, so now you have to do something with this. You're the last 2. You need to be ambitious.
Yes.
And so, yes. And so
they have to have heard that. They've heard this all their lives. Like, their mother has drilled this in, and their mother lived a long time to drill it in. Right. Yeah. And even in book 1, we're starting to see Gormla and her brother. I'm blanking on his name right now. I'm sure.
Malmorda.
Malmorda. I mean, I'm sure. Like, Malmorda is losing a little. He's still got the swagger, but he's losing a little bit of his warrior ability. And I mean, you're already starting to see these signs of, they're starting, and I think part of Gormla losing control of her power and being a little bit more impetuous in moments, it's like, she's starting to lose it, and when she does, it's going to be spectacular.
Yes, because she actually, Malmorda is sort of like the pampered prince, like the golden brother, golden son. Gormla has sort of almost been tasked with kind of whatever she must do it for her brother. And I guess that's where a lot of her attention comes from, because she's smarter than her brother, but he won't listen to her. But also she has her own son, and she also wants to further his ambition. So she's very conflicted and she's very torn as to what she wants. Right. And that's where a lot of the conflict comes from as well.
Absolutely.
I think probably if people listened to Gormla from the start of book 1, things would be better.
Things would have really worked out. Yeah. But Malmorda, again, has that pull of being the last, and if Gormla's son has to be used as a pawn or a piece or sacrificed, whatever, that's not his concern. It's not his problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, Cedric isn't Fomorian. He doesn't have the fire magic, so he's expendable, so it's just interesting. And I always love those kind of family dynamics. Like, I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones series, and I love the way George R. Martin was able to depict various family kind of relations. Like, I love the Lannisters and how completely dysfunctional they are.
And still a family at the same time.
And still a family. Like, even though they hate each other, sometimes they do, like, come together if the Lannister name is threatened. They hate each other, but that's okay. They will work together against their enemies. And you have this similar threads with some of the Targaryens, and then a very different dynamic with the Starks. And so I love that. I love kind of toxic, but kind of weirdly loving
the family drama. Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting to hear you're a fan. I'm a big fan of that as well. And I saw some shades of Cersei here or there in moments, which I mean is a compliment, because I think George R. R. Martin, and I think as the series goes on, you as well, pull that amazing magic trick that a good writer will pull sometimes, where you go from absolutely hating a character to absolutely rooting for a character, sometimes from one page to the next.
Yeah. And I think that's true in real life, isn't it? Because, it's very, very, and especially when these people have very big decisions to make. Sometimes there is no right decision.
Right.
It's very, very hard to decide what is best, because it's might not be best for you, but is it better for the people you're ruling? Is it better for your family? It's very, very hard. And I think Gormla, because I suppose she's more politically significant, she does have hard decisions to make. Fola doesn't actually. Like, her decisions are very much smaller in scale most of the time because they're to do with her family.
Yeah.
Although she does have big decisions at the end. There's like a big thing that happens for her as well.
Yeah.
And she finds that decision hard to make as well.
She does, and she gets herself in some personal moral quandaries of what,
Yes.
Oh my, I'm sure would love to, she gets that position. What's right? What's wrong at this moment in this time? Why can't I do what I want? But yeah, Gormless, she's got empire on her mind. I mean, it's a grander tapestry of what she's trying to do. And I thought you did a brilliant job portraying that, of a female character having the difficulty at that time that they would have in that position.
Yes, because that was kind of very key to what I wanted to do as well. Like, it is historical based. It's not historical inspired.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did want it to feel authentic. And I think sometimes, and I'm not pointing at any particular books here, but sometimes when people want to have strong women,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I think sometimes they kind of make them either like super snarky or have them in positions of power that they maybe historically wouldn't have been. And it's fine if it's like a fantasy series and it's your world. You can do whatever you want. But I think if I've decided to make this historical fantasy,
right,
like, the reader is going to lose immersion if it sounds ridiculous.
Sure.
And so Gormla is in the royal family. She is related to lots of the important people, but they have no impetus to listen to what she says at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. So true. So true. And you do such a beautiful job of portraying that. And also sometimes that I catch in other books or other series is like, sometimes someone that is that concerned with longevity and empire and these big things, they become somewhat one-dimensional. And I never lost the complexity of Gormla. That's why I was always able to not see her as evil. I mean, complex, sure, but not evil,
Yeah.
So
wait till you get to book 3.
Okay. Okay. We'll have to check back in. Back in.
Yeah. You can give me your Gormla update.
I certainly will. So I want to touch on, we've got the Tuatha De Danann pulling back. We've got the Fomorians here trying to stretch for empire. And in the middle is humanity.
Yes.
As we said, in all of its glory and profanity, all wrapped up in one hideous and beautiful package. And I love the way you portray this, the worth of us, the mystery of us, the hair-pulling, disgusting nature of us at times. It's all in there. And I think this is what makes Fola's journey so interesting to me, is she's discovering all this. And what she's been taught and what she's heard and what she's grown up believing, as you said, your whole world in Ireland in the 80s and 90s believing, and then that starts to get stripped away, and this crisis of conscience settling in. All that's being pulled away from her, and she's starting to see the complexity and the beauty. And I love the way humanity is pictured in the middle between these two titans that are on this parallel journey.
Yeah, that was very important to me, actually, because as well as kind of really enjoying Irish mythology, I read a lot of Irish like nonfiction history books.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always find Irish culture and history at this time to be very, very interesting. And what's especially interesting is because obviously the Roman Empire kind of came through the rest of Europe. They never came to Ireland.
Mm-mm.
And also then whenever kind of Christianity started to come to Ireland, lots of monks began to write down the stories that still existed, because the conversion came later and in a less severe way. All these old stories really still held sway. So we do actually have access to probably more information about Irish culture, kind of pre-Christianity, than maybe some other countries do, because kind of the Roman invasion, kind of changed things and changed cultures. But I was always fascinated by it. And I was always fascinated by how the legal system in Ireland was very much derived from the mythological stories. And
that's fascinating. Now, tell me about this.
So, for example, in like one of the very first stories that we have, one of the Tuatha Dé Danann, who's king, loses his arm in battle, and so he can no longer be king. So this is in this legend, and so in the Irish legal system, kings that had lost limbs in battle or had lost their eyesight could not be king. So this is like a law, and this is from this old mythological story.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the Brehon laws, which is like the ancient legal system, you know, they're very, very detailed, and you know, there's like laws about bees, but bees are kind of in lots of the mythological stories as being these very important creatures, and so there's like lots of things, like lots of the cutting of the hair for the woman, and kind of that would impact like her marriage value, like how much of a dowry she would get. You know, all these things are so considered. And lots of them come from kind of the old mythological tales that we would have. And so in a way, the mythology ties into the legal system even in the 10th century. And I just find that very fascinating that the Tuatha Dé Danann still had this legacy.
Sure.
And that in the 10th century, people still would have known that. And so I found the legal system so interesting. I found the way the culture differed to England very interesting. Like if you became king, it wasn't necessarily your son. It wasn't even like your firstborn son. It could be anyone within 5 generations of a king. And so the clan,
and that's in there. Yeah.
And so the clan would choose, and it was like a king didn't own the land. The clan as a collective owned the land. And so it's a completely different idea of ownership and what a king was expected to be, I guess.
Yeah.
And I just find that interesting. And whenever I was reading I was like looking for other books kind of set in this era, and I really couldn't find very many. And I thought this is very interesting, but also I've kind of told you things are through a very like positive spectrum. There's like a lot of negative things about this era of history as well.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So, like, as I said to you, that if you had the no eyesight, you couldn't be king. And so one of the ways in Irish history at this time, if you wanted to be king and say your cousin wanted to be king, if you could blind your cousin, you wouldn't have committed the mortal sin of murder.
But you took a big step. Yeah.
Yeah, but you've disbarred your main rival from kingship. And so suddenly people are kind of using the laws like in a kind of twisted way for their own ends and manipulating laws. And, you know, and I, you know, you see that in the modern day as well, like where people kind of, they don't use the law as it's intended. They kind of try to manipulate the wording or the meaning. And
everyone's looking for that loophole. Yeah.
Yes, exactly that. And so I just find it all fascinating. And I really, really wanted to depict it honestly in my work.
I love the depiction, and I'll tell you, I'll never forget my trip to Ireland, and I'll never forget standing in line to get my chance to look at the Book of Kells and other things, and that place that owns its stories in such a loving way. Everything springs from those stories. In that moment of crossing over from the old magic or different magic, wilder magic, to the more of a spiritual philosophy that we have today, and how the stories morphed and changed in that gulf in between, just fascinates me. And this is such an amazing depiction of that. I just was just, like I say, it was just almost written for me. And I've so enjoyed talking to you because I just read another book that depicted that blinding of someone else to take another step. So,
oh really? What book's that?
Yeah. I think it was A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think he absolutely dipped into some some Irish history and pulled that and used it in his latest book, if I'm remembering correctly. I've read a lot of books here lately, but I'm almost positive that's in there. So it's like, wow, I was listening to that going, oh my gosh, these things just keep coming around, you know?
Yeah. No, Irish history is like, I mean, I could talk about it for hours. I find it so fascinating.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely the same. So let me ask this, and this is just for me. I don't want to do any spoilers, but just for me. So I'm not even going to say names. Well, I'll say one name, but I'm all in. I am all in on this. And I don't want to misinterpret. I don't want people to think like this is a big, heavy romance book, because it's not. But there's a little bit of a spark here at the end with Fola, and I'm not going to say names, but tell me I get more of this. Tell me this goes somewhere, because I am all in on this.
Oh yeah, you're going to be happy for a time. Is what I'm going to say.
Okay, yeah. So by am I going to get it quickly or do in book? Okay.
Oh right. Well, this is a saga. It's set over a long period of time. I've tried to make that realistic. But yes, in the next book, you will see that beginning to flourish.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I don't want to give any more away, but that was just for me. I really want this.
Yeah.
So thanks for not letting me down, Shauna.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
No worries.
Okay. Perfect. So, hey, before we entirely run out of time, I want to touch base on, I've already, actually someone sent this to me because they knew how much I love book one. I'm going to get the other ones. The 3 novellas, are those in print or are those strictly ebooks?
They are ebooks at the minute. We are talking about doing a combined physical edition.
Please. Yes, please, please.
I would love that. And we have been working on that. So I really hope that happens, because I know a lot of people like prefer like the physical books as opposed to the ebooks.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's the intention. So fingers crossed that happens.
Okay. Excellent. And then you said what's around the corner for you, which I definitely want to touch on, is a prequel series. So we're going further back, or a sequel series, which...
Oh, right. Okay. So first of all, my next novella is coming out in July.
Okay.
And so it is a prequel novella. Yeah.
Prequel to children. Okay.
Yeah. So the 3 novellas, the first one is a prequel novella that's very strong on the fantasy side.
Okay.
The middle one should be read after The Words of Kings and Prophets, and it's gives you a bit more insight into a new character. Okay. And then the third one that comes out in July is a historical fiction prequel. So there's no fantasy in that one.
So kind of like a little bit of a counterbalance to that first prequel.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then my next book is coming out in September in the UK and Europe. I think it's November for USA. And it is a sequel series, but with a couple of crossover characters.
Okay, so it's not so far. Okay, well, with some of these characters, it could be. So, okay. All right, we'll wait and see. But that's great. So are you thinking 3 more, 4 more, 2 more? I mean...
Yeah, so I'm contracted. It's a trilogy that I've been contracted to write by my publisher. So it'll be 3 books. So the first book that's coming out in September, November, that's kind of completely handed in and done. And I'm writing the next book at the minute.
This makes me all very happy. I'm 1 book in, and I can already tell you this makes me all very happy. So is there, and I know this is a crystal ball type of question looking very forward, but after this next trilogy, are there other moments in history, other times, other characters that you're just dying to get to that you want to, not that you can tell us anything, but do you have other things percolating, cooking back there?
Yeah, I would really love to go back to when there was loads of Tuatha and loads of Fomorians, and they were kind of at their
peak.
The war
was going, right?
Yeah. I think definitely there could be a prequel novel in that somewhere. I think I definitely will do that at some stage. I'm writing a completely different series as well.
Oh.
So, but that's, I can't really talk about that because things are going on behind the scenes for that, as in terms of somebody acquiring that novel. that's completely different. It's like a completely different setting, world. It's not a historical fantasy at all.
So it's high fantasy, completely new, whole cloth created world. Oh, this is exciting.
Yeah. So, because so as we were talking earlier about how I decided to do things. So whenever The Children of Gods and Fighting Men came out, I was 38. Was I? Yes, 38. And, by this stage, I've been working for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
I'd had 3 kids. And I said to my husband, kind of once the book was released, do you know what? I'm going to take 2 years off and not work.
And just write.
And just write.
Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't, I got an advance. It wasn't a huge one, but it was enough to kind of keep me going for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of once I'm working from home, I'm not paying childcare anymore. And actually it kind of worked okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of something I really wanted to do, because to make it as an author is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And so I said to my husband, if I'm going to take these 2 years, I'm going to take that very seriously. And I'm really going to go all in on writing and trying to make a living from it. So writing the Gale Song is obviously, it's taken up the first, 2.5 years, really. But I just had this idea for another book, and I wrote it very slowly, really, in kind of bits of time, kind of when I was stuck.
So in the background while you were writing on Gale Song, this was, okay, yeah. Gotcha.
Just because sometimes with a Gale Song, it's difficult. There's a lot of research you need to do.
I'm
so some days you'd be like, I don't have anything to write today. I need to do a bit of research, but I want to do a bit of writing anyway. Mm-hmm. And so this secondary world, there's no research because it's completely all made up. And it was a lot lighter. And so it would, the first 80,000 words was just fun. And then I got there and I was like, I think this is actually good. I should finish it. So that's kind of been good. I think, as I said, when I'm writing and I'm taking this time off, not working, I really felt I had to use my time properly.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know what you said there? This is why I can't wait for this. Whenever it comes out, whatever it is, I'm going to grab it day one, because in my own artistic journey, it was drilled into me many, many a times that an artist at play is the most fun to watch. So you just doing this in the background, it's like, this was just fun. This was just fun for me. I can't wait to read that. I bet that is astounding.
Well, it's completely different. Is one thing, and it's a lot lighter, and it was just fun. And you see, whenever you're reading book 3, you will completely be, I understand why Shauna needed something fun to write in the background. Yeah.
I can only imagine. Book 1 is already, like I say, when Gormla, and it's coming, I know it's coming. She's going to lose control. It's going to be spectacular. And I can see it. This is going to end in tears. It's going to be I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it. All the writing is on the wall, and I'm getting into book 2 very, very quickly because I just can't wait to get back. And like I say, it just felt like book 1 was just written for me. It just took me back to looking into so much of the Irish history when I found out that was where my family came from, and I got obsessed with it. And just reading this was just special.
Well, do you know where in Ireland your family is from? Did you ever find the county?
We found the county because we went to the Cliffs of Moher, and we saw where that name, what county it comes from. Murphy comes from County Cork. But other than that, I would bedevil my grandparents for stories about where we came from. And the only thing I could ever get from my grandfather was, we came, so such and such came over here on the ship in nothing but his nightshirt. And that's to this day all I've got,
Right, okay.
And I'm sure that kind of story completely what that's like.
Yeah, I suppose, when did they come over? Would it have been kind of famine times or
Yes.
1850s?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so, people made it to the ships if they could gather the money, and they could have come from all over, really. It's like a real, obviously such a tragic time in Irish history. 1 million people died and 1.5 million emigrated, and the 1.5 million that emigrated were the ones that were lucky enough to be able to afford the fare in most cases, and probably had very little even to bring
after they
over.
got the fare. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
What a history. It was special for me to stand on that ground and be there and see so many things I saw. And it was special for me to read your book. And that's why just after book one, I had to reach out and meet you and talk to you. And I want to thank you so much for giving up some time and spending it with me today.
Oh, well, absolutely no bother, and invite me back anytime. And if you've any questions about books 2 or 3 or the novellas, just text and you can
I will hit you up. And I'm going to say right now, when I finish these first 3, when I finish this trilogy, I would love to talk to you again if we can get some time.
Yeah, perfect. That's absolutely no problem at all.
Shauna, thanks so much. Everyone listening, we tried to stay absolutely spoiler-free as we could, because I want everyone that hadn't picked up this series yet to get moved and motivated to feel like, oh, that sounds really interesting. Oh, there's all kinds of things behind the artist that she wanted to get on that page, to show me a little bit of a mirror, not only of this world, but the world I'm living in, and to show me a little bit of something about the human experience. This series absolutely does that. And I just hope you're moved to go out and get that first book, The Children of Gods and Fighting Men by SHAUNA LAWLESS, because it is a heck of a ride. Thanks so much for joining us. Shauna, thank you again for joining us. It's been just great.
Oh, well, thank you for inviting me.